For 11 days, the most important aircraft in the entire American air campaign sat in the open desert. 13 U.S. aerial refueling tankers parked on the runway at Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia. Satellite images showed them clearly. Iran knew exactly where they were, but it didn't fire a single missile. Then on day 14, 5 of them were hit in a single strike. So the real question isn't how Iran hit them. The question is why it waited. 14 days into the war, Iran launched a strike that immediately caught the attention of military planners across multiple continents. Ballistic missiles targeted Prince Sultan Air Base, one of the most important American air hubs in the region. When the attack concluded, early damage assessments indicated that 5 U.S. aerial refueling aircraft had been hit on the ground. The aircraft were KC-135 Stratotanker tankers, platforms that play a critical role in sustaining long-range air operations. These planes extend the reach of fighter jets and bombers by allowing them to refuel mid-air, making it possible to strike targets thousands of kilometers away and return safely. Without them, air campaigns become far more difficult to sustain. In the ongoing war against Iran, these tankers had been central to American and Israeli strike operations. They enabled repeated bombing runs against military facilities deep inside Iranian territory. What made the attack particularly unusual was how visible the aircraft had been before the strike. Commercial satellite imagery had shown the tankers parked in the open at Prince Sultan Air Base for days. Their positions were clear, their silhouettes unmistakable. Iran almost certainly knew they were there. Yet the missiles did not come until 11 days after the aircraft first appeared at the base, which raises a question that still puzzles analysts. Why wait? The strike on the tankers did not occur in isolation. Several days earlier, another incident had already raised alarms inside military command centers. A KC-135 Stratotanker operating over Iraq crashed under circumstances that quickly became the subject of intense scrutiny. All 6 crew members aboard were reported killed. Initial reports described the loss as an accident, but the situation grew more complicated when Iranian-aligned militia groups claimed responsibility. Their statements suggested that the aircraft had been targeted while operating in Iraqi airspace. If that claim was accurate, it would represent the first direct strike against the aerial refueling network supporting American and Israeli operations. Viewed in isolation, the crash could be dismissed as a single battlefield incident. But when the later missile attack struck the tankers parked at Prince Sultan Air Base, the sequence began to look far more deliberate. First, demonstrate that refueling aircraft are vulnerable in the air. Then show they are not safe even when stationed on Allied territory. The pattern suggests something more structured than opportunistic attacks. It hints at a phased campaign designed to undermine the logistical backbone of the air war itself, because while fighter jets and bombers often dominate public attention, the aircraft that make those missions possible are the tankers. And once those become targets, the entire air campaign begins to face a new level of risk. Modern air warfare depends on a system most people never see. At the center of that system are aerial refueling aircraft like the KC-135 Stratotanker. These planes function as flying fuel stations, allowing fighters and bombers to remain in the air far longer than their onboard fuel tanks would normally allow. Without tankers, the range of combat aircraft drops dramatically. Take advanced fighters such as the F-35 Lightning II. While designed for stealth and precision strike missions, their operational reach depends heavily on mid-air refueling during long-distance operations. Tankers allow them to launch from distant bases, penetrate defended airspace, and return safely. Remove the refueling network, and those missions become far more difficult. Yet the aircraft that sustain this system are also its most vulnerable element. Tankers are large, slow, and highly visible. Unlike stealth fighters, they cannot evade radar or maneuver aggressively under threat. They typically operate along predictable flight corridors and deploy from known bases across the region. Even when parked on the ground, their size makes concealment difficult. For an adversary studying the structure of an air campaign, this creates an obvious target. Destroying frontline fighters is difficult and resource-intensive, but disrupting the logistical aircraft that keep them airborne can have a far wider effect. By targeting refueling planes, Iran may be attempting something more strategic. Instead of attacking every combat aircraft, it is focusing on the system that makes the entire air campaign possible. Within a single week, the refueling network supporting American air operations suffered a series of setbacks. By some military estimates, as many as 7 aerial refueling aircraft had been lost or damaged through crashes, suspected attacks, and the missile strike that hit tankers on the ground. Among those affected were multiple KC-135 Stratotanker platforms stationed at Prince Sultan Air Base. These aircraft were not just part of the broader U.S. fleet, they were forward-deployed assets positioned specifically to support ongoing strike operations. Their loss forced an immediate operational adjustment. Remaining tankers began relocating to other bases across the region. Some were dispersed across multiple airfields, while others were moved farther from the most exposed locations. The goal was clear: reduce the risk of additional aircraft being destroyed in a single attack. But protection comes with a cost. Once tankers move farther from the battlefield, the entire structure of the air campaign becomes more complicated. Fighter jets must travel longer distances to reach refueling points. Rendezvous locations have to be redesigned. Mission planners must account for additional fuel consumption and tighter timing windows. Every adjustment adds friction. Strike packages that once followed direct routes may now require detours or additional support aircraft. The overall tempo of air operations can slow as planners adapt to the new logistical reality. Iran's objective may not be the complete destruction of the tanker fleet. Instead, the strategy appears aimed at something more subtle, turning each future airstrike into a more complex, slower, and more expensive operation. The tanker strikes are only one part of a much broader strategy unfolding across the region. Iran's approach has increasingly relied on asymmetric pressure, actions designed not necessarily to defeat a military opponent outright, but to steadily raise the cost of continuing the conflict. Alongside missile attacks and proxy operations, attention has shifted toward the arteries of the global economy. One of the most critical of those arteries is the Strait of Hormuz. This narrow corridor carries a significant portion of the world's traded oil supply. Even limited disruptions there can ripple through global markets within hours. Reports of naval mines, drone surveillance of commercial vessels, and attacks on shipping have already forced several tanker operators to reconsider routes through the Gulf. Insurance premiums for vessels entering the region have surged. Some shipping companies have delayed departures entirely, while others have begun rerouting cargo around longer and more expensive paths. Energy markets reacted quickly. Oil prices climbed as traders calculated the risks of sustained disruption to Gulf exports. For nearby Gulf states, the pressure is both economic and strategic. Their ports, infrastructure, and shipping lanes sit directly inside the expanding conflict zone. From Tehran's perspective, this may be the point. By threatening global energy routes and raising economic instability, Iran increases the political strain on the coalition aligned against it. The objective may not be battlefield victory alone. It may be to erode the unity of the alliance supporting the war, one economic shock at a time. For decades, aerial refueling aircraft occupied a unique position in modern warfare. They were considered essential, but relatively safe. Tankers typically operated far behind the front lines, orbiting in protected airspace while fighter jets and bombers cycled through for fuel. The assumption was simple: while combat aircraft faced the greatest risk, the logistical backbone supporting them would remain largely out of reach. Aircraft like the KC-135 Stratotanker became central to that system. But the events of this war have begun to challenge that assumption. First came the destruction of a tanker operating over Iraq. Then ballistic missiles struck additional aircraft parked at Prince Sultan Air Base. In a matter of days, refueling platforms were shown to be vulnerable both in the air and on the ground. For military planners around the world, that sequence carries important implications. Modern air campaigns depend heavily on aerial refueling. Fighters such as the F-35 Lightning II can project power across long distances largely because tankers extend their operational reach. If those tankers become high-priority targets, the entire structure of long-range air operations begins to shift. Air forces may need to rethink basing strategies, dispersal tactics, and protection for refueling aircraft. Future conflicts could involve new defensive systems specifically designed to shield logistical aircraft from attack. What Iran may have demonstrated is not just a tactical success. It may have exposed a structural vulnerability in modern air warfare. And if the logistical backbone of air power becomes contested, every future air campaign will have to adapt to a very different battlefield.